Sorry about that. I got lost in the building, so I do apologise. That'll teach me. So anyway, here we are, the Communities in Place Overview and Scrutiny, and it's just after 2 o'clock, and the first item on the agenda is apologies for absence.
Chair, we have apologies for absence from Councillor Bridget.
Okay, thank you very much. Disclosure of members' interest. None that I can see. If anything occurs to you, shout out. The forward plan of cabinet decisions. Sean, do you want to talk to us about this?
Yeah, no surprises. I think the bus service improvement plan, I think we covered in the meeting last week. I think that's now April. I'm not sure. I think it is April now. But nothing to add. There's what previously been reported, Chair.
Excellent. Questions, Brian?
Chair, I've noticed that there aren't any minutes on the agenda, and I just want to highlight, you know, the minutes are an official record which gives reference and review to the past meeting. So, you know, I understand that there may be some issues around the timing of the meeting, but they're really imperative to, well, they are to me.
To be a record, yeah.
Thank you.
Apologise for that. Sean, have we got an explanation of that?
Chair.
Sorry.
Yeah. I wasn't unfortunately unable to get them completed and circulated prior to this agenda going out, with it being a really short gap between meetings.
Okay.
So apologies.
That's all right. We'll be here next time, yeah?
Yes.
Oh, there we are then.
Thank you very much, Chair.
No problem. So the next thing on the agenda is 4.1, which is the Northumberland Fire and Rescue Service Community Risk Management Plan 22 to 26 consultation. And we have a Nick.
I had hoped just to ask one quick question about the forward plan.
Go on then.
At the top of the second page, it says the leisure review phase 1. It says that it's going to Cabinet on the 8th of Feb and coming to Communities in Place scrutiny on the 2nd of March. Is it not supposed to come to scrutiny before it goes to Cabinet?
No.
Is that a mistake? Or...
Sorry, the leisure review.
Yeah.
As I explained when the first meeting of the committee when we met back in June, it's the discretion of the committee whether something goes.
Okay.
It's not a done deal. So I did clear this with the chair. It's a confidential report. It was felt that now wasn't the right time for it to come to this committee, but I think the outcomes will be reported further down the line. You will have the opportunity to ask questions on it, but not at this stage.
Thank you.
Yeah, for me, the difference, I don't like pre-scrutiny. I think what we should be actually doing is scrutinising the decisions people have made rather than trying to second guess them. So particularly in this case, because it's a confidential report, I didn't think that we were in a position to see something before the cabinet members did and comment on it before the cabinet members did. So that's why I suggested we do it the way we are doing it. Okay, is that fine? So we have our fire chief and his cohort at the far right. Most of us have seen the actual report. It went to our area committees. So we've got no intention of redoing the presentation, and they're just going to talk to it, and any questions that you think of, then they will try and field them. Okay? Paul?
Thank you, Chair. As the Chair said, I've got with me this afternoon Deputy Chief Officer Graham Binning and Assistant Chief Fire Officer Jim McNeil, who are here for the second paper because they've got some responsibility for discharging a couple of the areas which are going to be discussed under the HMI update. But in relation to the Community Risk Management Plan consultation, yes, I'm not going to rerun the presentation which I've provided to, I think, all elected members in attendance today at the local area councils. But this is just an opportunity for us just to reiterate some of the key points from the consultation and perhaps just refresh memories on why we're having to undertake it, what we hope to get out of it, and again just make that plea, if you haven't already done so, to try and support the consultation process. So we have a statutory duty to produce a community risk management plan. That is a document which is there to identify both current and emerging risks which we face across Northumberland, and to introduce mitigations to reduce those risks for the benefit of our communities. It's also the vehicle by which we assess our resourcing capacities and determine whether we have the right resources in the right place to meet the level of risk and the risk profile of the Northumberland county area. The CRMP has been circulated both for this meeting and the LAC. So the points I would just like to draw out is really just to highlight just some of the activity which we've done to develop and reflect the current risk. So within the draft community risk management plan, which covers the period 2022 to 26, we've identified the 10 main incident types which we face within Northumberland and which we respond to as a service. And those incident types account for around about 93 or 94% of all of the incidents which we attend. What we are looking to get back through the consultation period is feedback from elected members, communities and our residents as to whether the plan looks and feels right, whether there is any feedback on areas which might identify some gaps. We think we've been very detailed in our planning for the community risk management draft. We think it builds very effectively on previous iterations of this document and goes much further into expressing how we actually go about the risk management process. So the consultation is open from the 5th of January to the 16th of February. It's open to all residents and interested parties, and within the paper we've highlighted a specific list of stakeholder consultees who've been directly engaged within the process. Just for reassurance, we've tried to make this consultation available on as many platforms as we can. So it's on the County Council website, it's on our bespoke fire and rescue service website, it's on all of our social media platforms. It has been subject to advertisement through press and published media, and of course one of the other avenues for raising its awareness to a broader range of stakeholders is through our attendance at meetings such as this, which are publicly accessible. Although it doesn't specifically get into too much detail within the paper, I think it is important to note that the Community Risk Management Plan is not a static document. So the draft is there to be flexible, and just to give some reassurance to scrutiny, on an annual basis we will review the plan. So we will look back at our performance, we will look back at how we have addressed the priorities which were included for year one of the plan. Those are listed in the back of the document. And we will look to see and continue to do a risk analysis based on our response to incident types and any emerging risks that we identify. So that should then lead to a continually evolving and live document which should give reassurance not just to the Fire Authority, the County Council and our communities and residents, that we have got a very clear and well understood position on what the risks and what we need to address those. I've just mentioned at the back of the document the 6 priorities, and I think they're of note to bring forward, and it just highlights what I've just said about some of the areas which we're looking to address in the first year of the document. So 2022-23 will very much be a period where we review not just our current operating models and our service delivery, but we will be looking to ensure that in terms of the emerging risks which we've identified in specific terms around British Vault and the Ashton, Blythe and Tyne line, that we do have the service capacity, training and equipment required to respond effectively to any risks that those specific risks throw up. So I'll just leave it at that, Chair. I would very much encourage member feedback on the plan. As I say, it opened on the 5th of January. It doesn't close till the 16th of February. There's plenty of time for feedback to be received. And I will give a commitment on behalf of the service that the plan is absolutely in draft format, and it is there to be shaped by the feedback we get from communities and residents.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Questions, anybody? Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, Paul. When you brought the CRMP to Tynedale LAC, I pointed out that there was a slightly misleading statement on the flooding and water rescue page. It said fewer rainy days in summer are expected. Winter rains could remain as likely as they are now. And I pointed out that those winter rainy days are expected to be rainier, wetter, and that the winters overall are expected to be wetter. So just to let you know that I've spoken to the climate change team about this, and they're looking into it. They're trying to find data for Northumberland, and either I'll get back to you or they will, to help you write a statement that tells the whole story rather than part.
Can I just bring the Deputy Chief in just in response to that, please, Councillor, because I think we've got an update on that specific issue.
Yeah, just to give you comfort, we were all furiously scribbling at the Tynedale LAC that evening. Deborah Brown, who was with me, has had communication with that team, and we are going to shape up a statement collaboratively that hits the mark. So no, really appreciate the feedback.
I appreciate your help. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you, Chair. Paul, thank you very much for a good document. Once again, you've got my full support as an organisation for Northumberland. You're the jewel of our crown. So the couple of searching questions, historically, because you are giving an excellent service to Northumberland, do you find that consultation around your role is light, or do you think that people are passionate, that they want to get involved with it, or do they just accept that it's a good job, well done? The other one was that obviously there's a lot of in your presentation and in the paperwork, a lot of feedback should be coming ironically from NCC elected members, county councillors, parish and town council and town councillors, and obviously the residents as well. I was just wondering what the feedback was and the percentage from them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Just in terms of the second part of your question, at the moment we've had about 30 responses received on the CRMP consultation. Within the feedback mechanism and the response, you have to identify yourself, so that there is a section that you can tick to say you're a councillor. There have been four responses which are specifically identified as coming from elected members. So that doesn't mean that it's only 4. It just means that there's 4 who've taken the trouble to tick the box and respond. Of the other responses, I'm pleased to say that about 80% of those are directly from residents, and at this stage we've had a couple of responses also in from neighbour and fire and rescue services. So I guess that leads on to the first part of your question, and I have to say that the current CRMP, as I've already said, is being constructed in a way by the first 12 months, but it'll be very much a review of our operating models, our operational response and our service delivery. So it's not a very contentious document. And generally speaking, if it's not very contentious, we don't generate a huge amount of consultation response. Certainly not to the degree that we had when we closed Hayden Bridge on-call station and removed the on-call facility from West Hartford. That obviously generated a very high degree of public interest and public feedback. So I would say at this stage it's probably in line with the feedback we've had on previous fire and rescue plan, or integrated risk management plans as they used to be called, but we'll be giving it a really strong push in the last 2 weeks just to try and encourage as much feedback as possible.
Do you need to come back, Councillor Gallagher?
Chair, just to come back on that, we want to help you as much as you can on that final push. It's a bit disappointing that we've only had 4 councillors reply to this, and the reality is I'm one of those, so, and I know my colleagues to the right have done it. So is there something missing here? What I would plea through the chair is that the leaders of all groups contact all the members to get involved with this and support our fire brigade in Northumberland. So the other thing that I was going to say, we're going through the consultation, we're going through the questionnaire. It was very simple and very easy to answer. But I found that they wanted to know more about me than I wanted to give in for the fire service. So they wanted to know basically, you know, my religion, you know, was I white English? So I think that maybe it's a missed opportunity of getting more information through. So the early part was, it was crucial and it was key questions, but the latter part was all about me as an individual. So just maybe a little bit of a learning curve there. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, and we'll certainly take that feedback into consideration for future consultations. Just to come back slightly on that last point, that demographic data is something which we took advice on and we were advised to include. So this is something where we've sought sort of external advice, and it's seen as best practice to include it. But I'll certainly take your comments on board. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. I've got Councillor Dodd and then Councillor Castle.
Yeah, just to make a comment on something that Nick just said there about wetter winters and all that, but just a comment on it. I think we've just had the driest January on record. So I don't know, you know, what's going on out there. Anyway, my point is, the storms we've had of late have been a bit of a wake-up call, and I know that this group's got a group that's going to look into that, but in sort of Mark Mather's area, Wooler and Councillor Bridget, I'm sure he would comment if he was here, Rothbury and John Riddle's areas, when something like that blows in and all the electric goes and all the phone masts are off, we've got a severe problem of communication, because that's come through loud and clear. And, you know, your electric's off and you find out, oh, well, you've got to report to a website. But you can't do that because you haven't got whatever. And you think, oh, I'll go on my mobile. But 19 mobile masts were out that didn't have power. I'm sure that someone somewhere will be thinking about how we're going to tackle this. But it could be an acute problem if your house was on fire and you had nowhere to get to ring or to help, cry for help to anywhere, if you lived out in these rural areas. And I know that, you know, the fire brigade is you know, I said this at the Castle Morpeth area LAC, you know, you help out a lot the other services. When there's a crisis, they go to you. But it's the communication that I'm concerned about for the really rural areas who could be, anything could have happened and we might never ever know. And I think that needs to be looked into, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Paul, did you want to respond to that, or are you happy with the statement?
I'm happy with the statement. It's obviously a well-known issue for the county as a whole, that communications can prove to be very difficult even when mass sites are up. But certainly the loss of communications within Storm Arwen in particular is something which has been looked at as part of the debrief process from that incident. So hopefully we will have some outcomes which might allow us to build some additional resilience into that, and it's one of the things which we do take very seriously as a fire and rescue service. and we do have some specific satellite ability to use satellite communications, but that's fixed in one vehicle. So potentially just looking at how best we can increase that capability and capacity is something which we'll take forward as part of the CRNP.
Can I come back?
Of course you can.
I think at the LAC meeting I was at, sometimes the only communication people will have will be a radio. And I'd like to think we look into some sort of deal with Radio Newcastle or somewhere where we could actually get stuff out or whatever. It's just a comment that I think it is important. Thank you.
Okay, so thanks, Richard. Councillor Castle.
Yeah, it's just what I said, philosophical point on the issue of consultation. Now, I'm one of those that hasn't replied because it didn't ask me to. It didn't say, do you think this is a good fire service or a bad fire service? It says, do I have anything to say, to add to what's in front of me? It's a good report. I've said this before, the LAC, very clear. Some of the statistics in here need to be memorised because they're completely contrary to what I had understood. The number of fires attended compared to the number of road traffic collisions, quite the reverse of what I actually assumed. But in terms of feedback, it's a bit like planning. I listen to the silent majority, those who aren't complaining. Do they have a strong view or not? Now, if I had a strong view, I would respond. But it isn't strong enough, in my view, for me to actually give you feedback, which doesn't mean to say I disapprove. In fact, you could assume if I'm not saying anything, I'm perfectly content. Is that a reasonable position to take? That's my sort of open question in my own mind. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, it is a reasonable position to take, Councillor Castle.
Thank you.
But, you know, Councillor Gallagher's point is equally valid.
It is.
So are we, yeah, Councillor Horncastle, I was going to bring you in on the end, so...
Oh, well, at the end.
Well, I was just about to look down the line and see if there was anyone else wanting to say anything. Then it would appear that we are at the end, so carry on.
Thank you. Well, before I say briefly what I was going to say, I think a lot of the things that Councillor Dodd's talking about will actually come to this scrutiny committee anyway in the near future, and that's the sort of thing you will be looking at. I mean, the management plan itself, obviously I think it's an excellent plan. It's very comprehensive. If you look at the index on it, it absolutely covers everything you can possibly think of. And it's been rolled out at the LACs, and I think a lot of the comments when we're talking about not a lot of response for elected members, there will have been a lot of response through the LACs. But one of the things that really sticks out in this plan to me is the future. The way it's having a good look at safeguarding what things that are going to happen in this county soon. We've got the British Volt factory, which has got extra special fire risks involved in it. It's got an ageing population, and the very fact that the population is going to increase by, you know, the ageing population is going to increase by so much over the next 10 years, that is another large risk for the fire service. It's all been looked at. And again, the Northumberland line, which brings its own risks. So I think it's not just covering like now and immediate future. It's starting to, you know, set the foundations for a real long-term affair in Northumberland. And I would love to actually use this opportunity to plug the wonderful new Fire and Rescue Service website, which went out live last week. And that's one of the things that will actually reach out to the community in a far better way. The community can see exactly what the fire service is doing, what they're involved in. It gives them a chance to comment. It's also a good tool for actually reaching out to people who may want to join the service. So I obviously think this is an excellent plan, and I would just like to compliment the officers that's been involved in putting this together.
Thanks for that, Councillor Horncastle. And on that, as we have a worldwide audience, would somebody like to say how they can find the website? Paul, do you know what it is off the top of your head?
Graham, you're the man.
So the website is www.northumberlandfireandrescue.gov.uk.
There we are. The whole world can find it now. Excellent. So if we're all happy and content with that, could I just ask that once the consultation is finished, we maybe get a note of what the consultation said, not necessarily your answer to it, but just, you know, if we've had 50 people write to us or contact us, then could we see what they've said?
Absolutely, Chair. We'll give a commitment to bring that back either in report form or as a verbal update.
Excellent.
And certainly, if there's any changes to the current draft arising from the consultation, I'll make scrutiny aware of that.
Brilliant, thank you. So then,
Chair, just on that, it's quite important, I think. Is this part of that consultation? Is the presentation to LACs part of that consultation? You did get questions, you get answers, so that's part of the consultation.
Yes, it is, Councillor.
yeah, the presentation of the LAC was part of the consultation, Councillor Castle. And we're just having a bit of a poke at it this afternoon. Okay, so the next thing on the agenda is a fire and rescue service again, and this is the inspection. It's on page 41. But the document on page 41, and however long it was the report that goes to Cabinet. So the recommendations, and you know, they're not for us to comment on. This is just really for us to read a bit of background, and I think Paul is just going to give us a kind of filling in of where we are. I think is that right, Paul?
Yes, Chair.
Yeah. Carry on then.
So this is an update and awareness paper for scrutiny, which just sets out where we've been graded on our second HMI, and that's Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services. So we had our second inspection last year, and the report into that second inspection was published on the 15th of December. The report prior to that was published in June 2019, and our initial gradings across efficiency, effectiveness and people were that we required improvement. The second report has us requiring improvement still on those three pillar areas. But one of the things I would just like to point out to scrutiny is the progress which is recognised not just by the HMI, but what is writ through the documents themselves, the reports themselves. So the 2021 inspection was brought forward by 6 months by the HMI. So that certainly had an impact on our preparation time, as did the loss of activity against the previous areas for improvement and continuous action plan arising from the 2019 report due to COVID. So although we didn't stop all of our activity in response to the first report, it certainly slowed down quite significantly as we changed our ways of working and delivered a very different model of service delivery to support both the county councils and the Northumberland communities together in response to COVID for our communities. That said, if you were to do a comparison between the 2019 and the 2021 report, they are very, very different. The second report is much more positive and much more balanced than the report we received in 2019. And I would just draw scrutiny's attention to point 2.2, which is a comment made at the start of the introduction to the latest report by our Northern Area Inspector, Andy Cook, where he recognises and states quite candidly that the service has made significant improvements since our last inspection in 2019. He actually goes on to say that we've delivered against almost all of the areas for improvement which were identified in that previous report or initial report. And just to reiterate and emphasise that that positive direction of travel, the HMI Northern Area Chief of Staff has also stated that for the avoidance of doubt, it's very clear that we're an improving service. So I just want to provide some reassurance to scrutiny that although the pillar gradings haven't changed, what sits behind those pillar gradings and are improvements within all three of those areas has been quite substantial. So it's I think it's also worth noting that since early 2020 we did benefit very much from the investment which we were given by the County Council So in response to the first report from HMI, there was some investment went in to address a lot of the capacity and resourcing issues which were identified. And just to add on to that, we had real benefit from the removal of what was at the time a very significant efficiencies target, which had been allocated to the service and was still sitting without a plan for its delivery at the time of the inspection in 2018. So we have made some significant progress. We've made some changes to both our internal capacity and our management structures and our way of working to continue to address the issues which fall out of the HMI report. But that said, unfortunately, the second time round we did receive what's known as a cause of concern. If you receive a cause of concern, the highest grading you can get within your pillar is requires improvement. So this quite clearly did have some impact on the effectiveness, I think it was, area of the report, and precluded us from moving to a good grading. I just want to bring Assistant Chief Officer McNeil in. Just I know there's quite a bit devoted in the report to the way we've addressed the cause for concern, but I would like to bring Assistant Chief Officer McNeil in, who's been leading on this for the service, just to give scrutiny a synopsis of our actions thus far and what we plan to do in the future. Jim, can I bring you in there?
Thanks, Chief, and good afternoon, everyone. So I guess I'll address the proverbial elephant in the room. It's a Scottish accent that's talking to you from the corner of the table. One of the things before I talk through some of the safeguarding processes we've pulled together from the HMI report, I don't know, it's kind of indelibly inked in my mind. I started the same day as the HMI came into the service on the 15th of June. So that's a thing the Chief and the DEP continually reminds me on, a bit of a Jonah. However, one of the things I need to be absolutely clear on, the reason that Graham and myself have been brought down is to try and wrap up some new thoughts and some new ideas and looking at all parts of the business. So what I did for the first number of months when the HMI was in, I literally carried out quite a critical review and fed that back into both Paul and Graham. So the reason we're sitting here is we're your assurance of how business is undertaken. The HMI is a superb opportunity for us to benchmark ourselves. And I must say, you know, Paul's given us the good grace and good favour to lift every stone and review and challenge and bring things forward. And there are a number of things that we have looked at, changed and brought forward as part of our continuous improvement journey. That you know, with absolute any, you know, without any fear or doubt, that will absolutely help us be in a much better position when we go for our next HMI report itself. So the thing that the Chief mentioned is the cause of concern was in relation to some of our dual contractors. So these are some of our colleagues who are whole-time and Green Book staff who also operate on the on-call part of the business. So that's a huge commitment for people to be, you know, in the community and responding back to incidents. The problem was arisen off the back of quite a significant review that the Chief undertook was that there were on occasions, a small number of occasions, that our staff could be diligently out at an operational incident or event and closing down that event and then coming into the work and feeling tired or fatigued. So that's what the cause of concern was. So looking at that, identifying the data that we were able to crunch gave us a really good starting point in terms of what type of safeguarding could we bring forward. So the change in posture, and I'll be able to evidence this just in a few minutes, the change in posture from the report, the HMI inspection outcome, and what I can actually give you evidence around just now, has got multiple tiers of safeguarding. So if you could just bear with me, I'll talk you through, and I'll try and not use some fire service speak on this. But the very first thing that we do, our fire control staff who are operate within West Hartford at headquarters, they have got a system in place. They've got their first iteration of a safeguarding process. They know every single dual contractor, of which we have 44 across the service. They know on Gartan, which is our system that gathers our roster and availability, they know at any given time who's a dual contractor, and more importantly, when that dual contractor is either due to start a duty shift the next morning or indeed a duty shift the next evening. So the very first thing we do is we continually review. That happens 365 days a year, it happens 24 hours a day. and our control room staff monitor and track and intervene across all mobilisations from midnight through to 6 o'clock in the morning, and from 10 o'clock in the morning through to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So that catches both colleagues who are due to come on day shift and also night shift. There's also, we've got 16 flexi managers who operate, so that they're our senior team who are deployed onto the incident ground. They've also got a task card to monitor and address any dual contractors. So the second layer of safeguarding is our flexis will automatically review the number of staff that we have on the incident ground and identify who's a dual contractor, and again if they're due to come on work. The process that we have built in, if you're tied into an operational incident for 3 hours, we will add an hour to that, and then we'll extend that beyond your normal start time. So if you've been out in the early hours of the morning and you've been out for 3 hours, we put an hour onto that, then your start time is 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock that afternoon. So that gives you time to go back to bed. The service has now got the resilience in the planning process around to make sure that the appliances, where that gap is created, is still maintained and kept on the run. That's worked superbly well. We have a direct face-to-face consultation and engagement with all 44 dual contractors to let them know our intention around their welfare and their well-being. And again, from a staff feedback point of view, that has went down really, really well. I'm going to quickly go through some of the things as part of an assurance to test that concept. So I was lucky enough to have been mobilised out to RAF Bilmer, where I witnessed that safeguarding process taking place. Storm Arwen, I know that was something that colleagues had mentioned a few minutes ago, but all the way through our deployment and boots on the grounds, all the way through the support of Storm Arwen, we managed to track and control and monitor and give time off to every person who fell within that dual contractor in terms of the wider staff welfare piece. There are multiple different events that I'm able to give you a degree of evidence around in terms of operational incidents, and right through to Storm Malik. Something that happened just at the weekend there. Again, we were able to track every single person and invoke the safeguarding process. So it's working really, really well. The 3 feedback sessions I've had directly with the HMI, and based against the 3 points that the cause of concern was referenced against, is I have got great assurance that we have met and, if not exceeded, the ask that came from the HMI. And we have openly, and we welcome the HMI coming back in for a reality test of that concept on the 10th of March. So that will give it the assurance, that will give hopefully the sign-off that the safeguarding processes we have in place will absolutely have met everything around it, the cause of concern. The final thing in terms of a slight look ahead, the dual contractor role itself is something that's absolutely critical. Our dynamics and our population around communities has changed, as you know. You need to work away from the community you live in. The dual contractors is a great stopgap in terms of making sure we've got appliance availability and we can maximise the appliance availability. The move forward, the dual contractors will only be used for an interim solution until we could get the on-call recruitment strategy gathered together to make sure we've got enough resilience plugged into the service to make sure we've got 24 hours a day cover, 365 days a year. And to that, and I know colleagues will be interested in this itself, as part of that ongoing review, away from the safeguarding process, but it's absolutely linked into it, the ability to look at RDS recruitment, so our on-call retain duty system recruitment, that was something that maybe happened once or twice a year. We have triggered the process that will now run 365 days a year. It will now be held on an electronic portal. So what we will do is we will draw down staff very, very quickly. And I'm really proud to say we have got an on-call course starting on Monday with 8 people. And that will be a huge, a huge impact when they land back on station. But parallel to that, there are another 2 courses that will run before the summer of this year. And we're also looking at variation to contracts. I've had the privilege of working with retained and volunteer staff through most of my career. And I've been involved in reform when I've been back up in my former service. And the things we're bringing forward, we're looking at unique contracts that will look at daytime cover. We'll look at stepping away from the typical and the stringent, it's either 90 hours you need to provide a week or 120 hours. We have got staff deployed just now who are giving us 40 hours of availability, and that's already had a huge impact on our RDS availability, on our on-call availability. But the last thing, Chief, if I may, I just want to give everybody the assurance. The HMI, when the HMI report landed, we done a line by line and a page turn, and there is nothing that was gathered within the HMI report that we weren't either working on, working across,
just about to finish. So the HMI report did not set a new direction of travel for Northumberland Fire and Rescue Service. What it did, it galvanised how we were going to deliver our plans. It absolutely threads back into the Community Risk Management Plan, which is our absolute sovereign document. And again, I genuinely look forward. It's a really exciting time for Northumberland Fire and Rescue Service. It's a really exciting time for Northumberland County Council as we step forward into what the next year, the next 18 months, the next 24 months, what will give for us. And again, I'm just hugely proud to be here as part of the Northumberland Fire and Rescue Principal Officer team. And I'll hold on that, Chief, if that's okay.
Thanks, Jim. Really appreciate that feedback, and I think that's that leads us on to just drawing the report to a bit of a close. And I'm going to introduce the Deputy Chief in a moment. But out of that second report, we ended up with 25 areas for improvement. And as the Assistant Chiefs already said, none of those were areas which caught us blindsided or which changed any of our direction of travel. But I just would like to bring Graham in just to give some an update and some assurance to scrutiny on how we're actually looking to address those, because I think what we've established this time round, which is different from our response to the first initial report, is the resilience and the robustness of the measures that we're taking to make sure that we absolutely can audit and have full governance of our response to the HMI areas for improvement. Graham, can I just bring you in there, please?
Yeah, thank you, Paul, and good afternoon, everyone. Again, I think it's important probably to reflect on Jim's point that he made, that for the last 14 months of me being in post as a brand new principal officer in Northumberland Fire and Rescue Service, and for the last between 7 and 8 months that Jim's been here, the service has had the benefit of almost a 365 days a year inspection team, because that's what Jim and I have effectively operated as. We've come in, I suppose, as the rebel outsiders, not rebels without a cause, but rebel outsiders, to look at every system, every process, every department. And I have to commend Paul, our chief, for absolutely being open to the service being literally opened up from the inside out. So we've been operating in that posture, and we continue to commit to working like that. The role and the promise I made when I set my stall out for this role was to look comprehensively across all details on strategic planning and performance, amongst many other things, including collaboration and partnerships, but picking out the details of strategic planning and performance. I started work on day 2 with a recommendation to Paul that we probably needed to extend our IRMP, our Integrated Risk Management Plan, at the time for the reasons that Paul set out, but also so that I could set a posture for the organisation to comprehensively put a picture of all of the moving parts together and understand where the focus needed to be on certain parts of performance or certain departments across the whole of the Fire and Rescue Service. Through doing that, for the last year, we've been developing, and you'll read this again through as a thread through the Community Risk Management Plan, we've developed what we call the Performance and Assurance Framework. And the key bit in that really for me is the assurance element. It's assurance for us as a service to look internally to understand, are we doing the things that we set out to do? Are we doing anything that's arbitrary? And if we are, we will stop doing it. And also, how do we assure elected members and our communities and our executives and county council and elected members, how do we assure you and all of them that what we set out to do in our Community Risk Management Plan we are in fact doing? So the Performance and Assurance Framework is overseen by myself. I chair a Strategic Performance Board quarterly. Myself and Jim scrutinise on a monthly basis through brand new Directorate Management Team structures that Jim and I both chair. We scrutinise every single core measure and service measure across every moving part, as I talked about earlier, so that we can scrutinise on a monthly basis and then bring to the service leadership team on a quarterly basis a position of assurance. And what it does is it allows us to look at the corporate health of the organisation holistically all the time, and it allows us to really maturely look at any emerging risks, so that if there's an element of our business that's emerging as a risk that we may need to flex resource or finance or external support across into, we are looking at all of the business all of the time, and all of our department managers are becoming absolutely competent at understanding the impact of elements of the business across all of the fire and rescue service, and nothing happening in isolation. Also, you'll have read within the Community Risk Management Plan, the Continuous Improvement Plan is effectively the mechanism for how we make sure that every moving part is understood, collected and then scrutinised. And then through that Continuous Improvement Plan, that the reports into the Strategic Performance Board are the absolute scrutiny, which leads us to be able to give that level of assurance, and also to highlight any levels of risk, as I said, as they evolve. So we are now into a posture that I consider this service to be in a cycle of continuous improvement, which will never stop. The HMI, Her Majesty's Inspectorate, coming in, I see them as a real bonus for us. It's free consultation. It's an external body coming in and assessing whether we are effective, efficient, and if we are focusing properly and effectively on our people. And I think, as Paul's alluded to there, the HMI report that we have, albeit that the pillar judgments have remained the same, the context and the narrative of the part of the journey that we're on, I think, is quite significantly different. And as the three of us sit in front of you, I think you'll find that we're pretty optimistic about the next chapter for Northumberland Fire and Rescue Service. So, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Questions, anybody? Councillor Morfitt, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, all three. I'm interested in what I read about dual contractors, because I've done a lot of dual contract work in my time, and it can be very tough. I was interested in, it says at the top of page 45 that you have to be called out for more than an hour to qualify for a delayed start time the next day. And I was just wondering, how often are dual contractors called out for less than an hour? If it happens very often, it doesn't seem very fair. They don't get a delayed start time. Also, when does the clock start and when does it stop? And how do they know what time to reset their alarm clock for? Do they get like a text or an email before they even get home telling them what time they're due in the next day? How does it work?
Yeah, Councillor, thanks very much for that. And again, it's probably one of the things we try and tease out early doors in terms of what that would look and feel like. So the criteria of less than an hour or composite out for more than 2 or 3 incidents that accumulate beyond that time is the threshold. The timescales that we look at, and I guess we played a lot back into our staff in terms of what did that dual contract and safeguarding process need to look and feel like for you. So we've got an incident summary sheet. That was we were able to draw up an incident we had in Alnwick just a few at the start of the session. We've got an incident summary sheet, and literally every incident we attend that's got a dual contractor on it. You may find that an appliance could be mobilised out, and literally as they're going, if they're forming part of a predetermined attendance, if they're going to an alarm fault, for example, the turn back message would come back almost straight away. So they could be out literally half a mile down the road and turn back. We don't think that is something that's going to impact in their availability to come into the workplace and be fatigued or tired. Excuse me. So that 1 hour or the composite is just that it's something we are working on, and it's proven really, really effective just now. We are catching people at the right time. In terms of the time scale, if you're going to start working a day shift at 8 o'clock in the morning, the review period is from midnight right through to 6 o'clock in the morning. At 6 o'clock in the morning, they automatically come off the run anyway because they're due to start their normal day shift. So that review will trigger at midnight every night of a daytime, because we also have to be acutely aware. We can have staff who are out during the day, who could be out on a grass fire or out at a number of pumped fire engines out at an event for an extended period of time, and they could be out there for 4 hours, 5 hours, and then come back in, start on shift, and then go back out to relief crews who are already there. So the safeguarding will run not just for the start of a day shift, but also for the start of a night shift. But there's a much, much wider strategy that we have wrapped up in terms of how quickly we relieve our people who are on the incident ground. So we're typically operating around 4 hours that you will be at an operational incident, and then we'll rotate you away from that. So the dual contractor is only the absolute gearing in the middle of something that's much, much wider in terms of welfare and control. And all of that information gets passed on to the individual via control, and we've also got a duty manager. The duty manager will confirm start time and end time for every person. So it's a phone call, it's a line of sight, it's a communication that gets played back by the individual, and that happens at every occasion. So again, probably 2 tiers. Control notifies them, then the duty manager will recontact the individual to say, don't come in until 12 or don't come in until 1, or you know something based on that time, don't come in at all. And then they arrange the cover, whether it's overtime or whether it's staff movement, to provide the gap cover for that firefighter not being there for the start of that duty system.
Councillor, just on the first part of your question, the last time we did the analysis, and we haven't specifically done it for this dual contract, but across the service it's about 80% of incidents are less than an hour. So that is that the last time we looked at it, that was a reasonably good split between whole time incidents and on-call incidents as well.
Okay, anybody else? Mark, did you want to? And then Richard.
Thanks, Chair. When you first look at this report and you say requires improvement, you think, crikey. But actually, when you read it, the cause of concern has been really well noted out and how it's been methodically looked at. And I think that it's a quite positive report. I mean, what's been said a number of times tonight is assurance. And I've definitely listened to this and come away that we've got a top team that's assuring me that this service is going to be protected and, you know, good assurance for the county. And I think we've seen that during the storm. I've definitely seen that in the response at Wooler. You know, we had firefighters from all over the county come day in, day out and give a fantastic service, and that's been brought back to me by members of the public. My only worry is, coming from a retained area, is the amount of retained availability that we've currently got. And I was pleased to hear about the changes to the way you're looking at on-call and the flexibility that we're going to be providing. So that was my only concern, is, you know, where are we at the moment with the amount of retained availability, and where do you aim to be? Thanks, Chair.
Councillor, thanks very much for that, and I know we'll probably have an offline chat just around some of that kind of longer term planning. So, Graham had mentioned about our core and service measures. One of the things that I brought forward, and again to wrap up a huge degree of assurance around us, one of the measures that belong to me as the Director of Community Risk and Response is I've put forward a 100% availability for all of our appliances, whole-time, day staffing and on-call. So that's my aspiration. We will operate with a 4% variation to that, and that just allows us to do recruitment and make sure we can retain people correctly. But we've got a number of our appliances, a number of our stations who are already sitting at 98.5%. There's probably a handful of stations that just need a bit of work, and that's the priority that we've wrapped up around our recruitment strategy and our variation to contracts to identify where do we need people, and more importantly, how quickly do we step away from that 90 or 120 hour contract? How do we identify those people who are still within the community, who can provide daytime cover that gives us that 24-hour cover that we're looking at just now? But from an availability point of view, we are sitting really healthy, and that will only improve with every person that lands on a station, with every person that brings additional hours in. That will only be an improving picture, but we have a very, very large proportion who are already above 95% availability. And that's a celebration. That's something we should be really proud about, because these people do an outstanding job of what they are, the backbone of our service. And I genuinely cannot thank each and every one of our on-call part of the business enough. They are just superb people, and our job is to make sure we give them the resources and the hours and the time to make sure we can deploy those resources into the community when they're needed. Thank you.
You all right, Mark? Yeah. Richard?
Very briefly, Chair, I'm looking at the fire prevention that you do. And this is just out of personal, because I've got fire alarms, and we get a wonderful bit of kit for not a lot of money. The problem I've got with them is
you've gone back to the risk management, have you, rather than what we're talking about?
It's got automatic false alarms, etc. I'm going on here. And, you know, there's a picture of someone moving a
Yeah,
fire alarm.
we kind of did that bit, but
Yeah,
go on, Richard, carry on. But we're a bit under the cosh now, so ask
Okay.
your question.
You can hardly change the batteries in them. And that's a design fault that I think you need to look at, because they're all, the ones I've got are all useless. Because I can't get the batteries out. That's all.
Buy another one. Right. Right, thanks, gents. We appreciate that. And if we could get the note on the consultation at some point, that would be great. Councillor Horncastle, did you want to wash up, or are you done?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Right then. I became the Fire Authority Chair at the end of May last year. And within the space of three and a half weeks, I was thrown into an HMI inspection. And this is an organisation I knew absolutely nothing about. And not many of us do. We think they're just big red trucks fly around and squirt a bit of water around. Mark has been involved in the past, so he knows all about it, but I knew nothing. But when I was invited up there in early June, I couldn't believe what what the service was like. The place was actually buzzing with energy and positivity, and the people had so much pride in what they did, and how they are such an important part of the community. And I was just in a call with Graham the other day. We were talking about the difference, historic difference now between the fire service and the police, whereas in the rural areas years ago, nearly every village had a police station. Well, for various reasons and budget reasons, that doesn't happen anymore. So people don't feel quite as close to the police as they used to. But the fire and rescue service is actually more embedded in the community than it used to be. So in a very short space of time, I got to know these very, very professional people. And Jim and Graham were relatively new at the service, and I realised what a massive asset they were to help Paul to drive this service forward. So the inspection, which is what we're talking about today, yes, we were obviously disappointed in the result that came out. But when you actually read the report and what HMI actually say, this service is moving forward. And if it hadn't have been for the fact that this was a virtual inspection, so you imagine that, a virtual inspection of the fire stations and the service in Northumberland, if it hadn't been for that and the fact that they themselves brought the inspection forward by 6 months, and they admitted that some of the things that were put in place hadn't had time from the previous inspection, hadn't had time to actually come to fruition. If it hadn't been for that, we could have had a totally different outcome to this. But are we downhearted by this? Yeah, we're disappointed, but I know the service is moving in the right direction, and myself and Gordon Stewart, my deputy, we love mixing with these people. This service is absolutely, I've got total confidence in it. And getting back to what's just been mentioned about the storm, you can guarantee when you get an issue like the two storms we've had, who's there first? It's the fire and rescue service that's there first. You can always rely on them. And the other services are coming along just slightly later. I was out during Storm Marwan with the retained service up in my area, delivering meals, delivering logs, checking on people. Absolutely brilliant. And so we're talking about report, still requires improvement, but absolutely moving in the right direction.
Excellent, thank you very much. And now I'm very conscious of the time because I've been told that we should be out of here by 3:30, so we'd better swiftly move on. Thanks, gents. You can stay if you like, but I'm sure you've got fires to put out.
Thank you, Chair.
That's all right. So the next thing on the agenda is 5B, briefing on the empty homes in Northumberland. Liz, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I think this is an update.
You need to put your microphone on, or the world won't hear you.
Forgot about that. This is an update report on one that was brought to scrutiny back at the end of 2019, and it provides an overview of the empty homes that we've got, where they are, outlines some of the processes that we've got in place to bring those empty homes back in use. And I think importantly, includes a couple of case studies which I think illustrate the challenges of bringing some of those homes into use, but also the difference that it can make when we're successful in doing that. But I'll hand over to Julie because she is the expert on this particular topic.
I was going to say, after Liz, we're going to have Julie, who is going to put flesh on the bones. But don't forget to put your microphone on.
Thank you, Chair, yes. So, yes, as Liz said there, this is a follow-up from a report that came to committee in December 2019 and was requested just as a bit of an update to reflect the work that has been taking place around empty homes. Just to give members a little bit of context, we are fortunate in the timing that the Department of Levelling Up Housing and Communities brought a report out in November 21, which gave England-wide figures for empty dwellings, and they've out of the figures there, 1.93% of all properties that were eligible for council tax charge in England were recorded as empty. As a comparator, the percentage for Northumberland is 1.35%. So we are below the national average for empties, but we have to be aware that obviously we're a very large county with large rural areas where there may not be as many empty properties, so there are clusters. Comparing to the last report that was brought forward on the 5th of November 2019, at that point we had 1,985 long-term empties, which are properties which have been empty for more than 6 months. In this report it's 2,070, so there's been a slight increase in the rate from 1.29% to 1.35%. So during what has been quite a challenging time for resource to be involved in work in bringing empty homes back into use, we've managed to pretty much maintain the levels of empty properties, although I do realise that there are huge challenges with properties that have been empty for some time. So hopefully you've had the opportunity to consider the information within the report, which gives you a bit of the background as to where we are. Ashington and Blythe remain the highest areas for long-term empty properties. They've actually switched position since the last report. Ashington's moved up to first place with Blythe just second. But there have been some significant improvements. Ponteland has dropped down significantly from 96 to 77. And new areas have come forward, such as Alnwick and Amble, which is quite interesting, which weren't in the previous report as an area of concern. So we do have a private sector housing team that sits within the Strategic Housing Service of Housing Services. It is a relatively small and perfectly formed team with 4 officers. We have recently recruited to a senior officer who has got a selective licence and experience, and we have a line manager within there with a housing assistant. So it is quite a small team within the group. But within that team, working very closely with colleagues in environmental health, environmental protection and planning, they have brought back approximately 800 properties into use over the last 5 years, averaging about 160 per year. A lot of that has been through negotiation with the owner, but we have used other initiatives, including the Empty Dwelling Management Order, which has brought 15 long-term empty properties back into use. For them to be eligible for an EDMO, a property has to be empty for at least 2 years. You have to demonstrate a lot of different factors for it to go through the process, and then it has to go to a property tribunal to be approved. So it's a very long process to get it through, but you do get some excellent results out of that. We currently have 15 properties that we are managing under the housing management team, which in 7 years' time, we have them for 7 years, and then we can talk to the owner about moving them back to them. We've also done a lot of work under purchase and repair, where 12 empty properties have been brought back. That's primarily been through Homes England funding. Homes England has moved its focus to new provision, however, so there's not a lot of focus on purchase or repair or lease and repair. So we're just looking at different ways of doing that. without that funding coming forward. We try to do a lot of work with owners and landlords to bring properties back into use. We're currently revamping the property accreditation scheme, which will be launched shortly, and we'll be taking it through executive for approval when we've formulated that. But we are conscious that we have these long-term empties. You've probably got them in all of your areas, that cause continual issues that might actually fall out of the figures, you know, where they're either not habitable or there is no owner. The owner may have passed away and nobody's taken ownership of that. And we've recognised that. We have a corporate empty homes forum that talks about those properties. But what we did was we then initiated an empty homes working group that looks at those stuck properties, and we were allocated a £50,000 reserve to try and do some work around those. I chair that group, and that's made up of housing services, planning services, legal, environmental protection, environmental health, building control. And what we're trying to do is combine all of the powers that we have under one umbrella to try and get some sort of momentum with some of the properties. We only focusing on one or two at a time because they are really, really difficult. And we're at the stage with one of them where we're about to move to legal action to try and do enforced sale. And we're also looking at another one. We've appointed a barrister to give us an opinion because we're looking at one or two properties within a portfolio of a group of properties where somebody has passed away. So we're seeing what we can do for the whole of that portfolio. It's not a quick process. It's not an easy process, but we are trying to look at different and innovative ways of dealing with empty properties that can help resolve some of the problems that you encounter as councillors when you get inquiries from your constituents or residents. So there's various different things that we're doing within the team to try and we're also looking at new opportunities. We are in the process as a housing service going through a housing review, which you will have heard about, and part of that is looking at where we can get use the resource that we have available effectively to target the most problematic areas, of which this could be one. So there are opportunities for even virtual teams working with other parts of the council to try and get some traction with some of the more challenging ones. But hopefully it's given you a bit of an insight of the work that's being done at the moment.
Thanks, that's brilliant. Thank you, that's really great. Now, I have Councillor Dodd, but Councillor Nesbitt asked if she could come, and presumably she has some questions. So it'll be Councillor Dodd, Councillor Carty, Councillor Nesbitt.
I know time's against the clock.
That's all right.
I don't know if you recall, Jeff, but when I was chairman of Family and Children's Services 10, 12 years ago, we did a very similar report. And why we did it was that we were about to start to close rural schools. And it was, why on earth is there not more footfall going into the local shops, the local schools? And it was very interesting and stark. I think your area only had 2 empty properties as the prize winner. Further north you went, especially Bamborough, had over 100, and every councillor has, on average, about 40 to 50 empty properties in their domain. I mean, I've got the ones that were empty that I was really interested in are still empty. You know, one's a shrine to someone's mother. One had a 1970s Ford Consul. That goes how back it was. Mature tree grown out of it. And it's still empty. So I applaud everything. And we looked at the legislation that had come through in 2006. And it was this chocolate fire guard, really, because the process is so long. And it's not very efficient. However, the number is down. It's probably down on average about 500 to 600. So progress has been made. But it really is banging your head against the wall on some of these. And I wish there was more weapons in the box. And I wish you well.
Thanks, Richard. Councillor Carty.
Well, there is a number of these derelict empty properties in my ward, and they're really bad. And it's having such a bad effect on some of the local residents. One of them is quite seriously ill now with stress. in a heart condition because of the property next door. But I know it's a slow process, but why can't it be made quicker? That's one of my questions. There's got to be a way around this to make it quicker, because we've battled for years with these properties. The other thing is, where you actually get the council tax and you double the council tax, and you know, so people will try and bring their properties back up to speed by paying more council tax. How on earth do you get the council tax from the properties that are in my ward, which are so derelict? I don't know how you would get the council tax in, because they're just uncontactable, the people.
So do you want to come back now, Julie, and then, is that you done yet? And then Kath.
The council tax is a tricky one, because sometimes the properties are in such bad condition there is no council tax being charged. They're uninhabitable. So there's not, we haven't got that. We're looking at a property at the moment which is in exactly that situation. So there isn't any council tax debt that we can use leverage for to get court action, maybe. One of the properties we are dealing with has a huge council tax debt, and we're using that as the anchor in to get to the legal process. So it's trying to see which is the best way in, and often there isn't an easy route into using this despite notices being issued. We would do work very closely with legal services and take their advice, and they would tell us if there was a route to do that. But often they're tied with that. I think I don't know the answer to how we make it quicker, if I'm honest. I think we're doing our best with the resource that we have. It may be that you know, other local authorities have dedicated empty homes teams. We don't have that at the moment. It may be something that, as a council, we want to consider for the future, or whether that be a virtual team. But I think it all needs consideration about how that would be resourced and what the focus would be. What we are doing is considering the delegations for the private sector housing officers to see if they can support some of the actions that maybe would traditionally be taken by environmental health or environmental protection, as far as inspections and that are concerned, naturally not around the legislation that they specifically deal with, but just to see if we can get more resource into doing some of the work that we know needs doing when teams are struggling to get people, because that, I mean, when we're talking about the size of the team, that's for the whole of Northumberland and all of the empties, and then obviously the environmental health team, it's often a challenge for recruitment for them. So where we need their support to do something, you know, it's the availability of people. So there's a lot of challenging properties out there, and it's how we focus the resource that we've got on targeting the ones we can get a success with. But I do understand and empathise with the frustration that you'll each have in each of your areas about the empty properties that are there, and how quickly we can do something about that particular property. Is one of the ones we're looking at as that portfolio, as you know, Councillor Carty, because we're keeping you updated on that one. But we do understand the impact on the neighbour. It's a huge impact. So the sooner we can get through that. But as I say, we've appointed a barrister for advice, and they'll guide us in the right way, I think. And that's where the use of this reserve is really useful, because it allows us to do that.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Nesbitt.
Hi, Julie. Thanks for that report. It was really good. But my concern is we've got a regeneration programme going on in Blythe. It's in the town centre. Now, the area I'm looking at is the Coop & Kay area, which is adjacent to the town centre, which brings its own problems in itself. And there's a lot of absent landlords there who they couldn't care about the property. A lot of them stand empty. I mean, to be honest with you, the accumulations in the backyards, fly tipping and that's going on. I mean, it's causing mental health all over the place, because it's very run down, really run down. And just my question is, can I get some kind of support from yourselves to try and look at some of these properties and to bring them back into use, which would really help me a lot. You know, we are looking at other ways, but this is a big ambition of mine, I know, to try and do this. But, I mean, to me, to be perfectly honest, there was part of the area where I would just demolish and get a redevelopment in. That's part of it. But, you know, we can't go down that road. And the other part is about what you've just mentioned. You're working on one empty property in particular, but actually there's one portfolio got about 7 empty properties that are totally derelict. He thinks it's a penthouse, you know, and I think...
Yeah, let's not get too specific.
All right, Jeff. But you know me, I get very passionate about it. But anyway, it's just asking if I could get any kind of support from yourselves on the areas of the Cup and Key, especially with it being adjacent to the town centre and the regeneration programme that's going on. Thanks. Thank you, Julie.
Yes, certainly we're aware of the regeneration programme and we're working very closely. We're actually part of some of the groups that are talking about Blythe. What we are looking at is the potential of selective licensing a certain area, which may help with that. And we're just at the process of finalising that report, getting the finance aligned, and then we'll be taking it to executive for discussion to see if that's doable. I probably can't commit to giving you a dedicated resource for that area because they are such a small team and they have to cover the whole of Northumberland. But if that selective licensing proposal comes forward, that would mean the formation of a focused piece of work on that particular area. So we'll keep talking to you, Councillor Nesbitt, and let you know what's happening as that develops. But we're nearly there. As I say, we just need to align the funding and then get executive, have the discussion at executive about it.
Thanks for that, Julie. I think the selective licence is a way forward because it will certainly have a big effect on that community, which will mean probably more empty properties.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor Gallagher and then Councillor Mather.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I feel as though I'm up against it because we've only got a few more minutes left, but there's so many questions and so many issues that I have with the report, questions that I need to get answered. But the overall is that, you know, I welcome Councillor Nesbitt to come here to our scrutiny meeting because it's her passion and, you know, she understands more than anybody else the issues in Blythe. But they're very similar in Ashton as well. We're trying to drive a regeneration project. We're trying to invest in the town itself. And, you know, I feel heartily sorry for you if you've got a small team of 4 for the whole of Northumberland. And you've got me support, but I think this administration should support your department a lot more than what it is. And what my concern is, and it was mentioned earlier, you know, I would just look at the ones that we can quickly sort out because they're not the problems, it's the longevity ones. The ones that have been lying there for years and years. And ironically, neighbours do suffer, the area suffers, the value of the people's houses suffer. And then people just sell up and then the properties next to these bad properties are just rented out and they don't care. So we need to lift our game up on this. My other beef is around enforcement, and I get what you're saying. You sit round and you sit with all the barristers and you sit with all the legal people and you sit with the health. But the reality is we need enforcement and a message to say that if you let your house deteriorate so much, there's a penalty there. And does the message get out there? It's too easy for people just to lift up, walk away, shut the door and leave an empty property. And that whole area comes down. So, you know, a group of people, 4 people for the whole of Northumberland, when you said openly that, you know, you're only looking at 1 or 2 properties at a time. To be quite honest, for me, I would like to be looking at areas at a time. And, you know, for example, Cath, I know we've had discussions about that. There's 3 streets in her ward. There's areas in my town. So we need to have an overall view of the area instead of dissecting it down to 1 or 2 properties and having a win on that one. Because it's like King Canute, it's a tide that's coming. And, you know, I take on board what Councillor Dodd said, that the numbers are coming down. But the quality of houses are also coming down dramatically as well. People used to be really proud of their area, wipe their streets, clean their streets. But that's not happening anymore, and there has to be some sort of enforcement. And Councillor Carley's 100% right. Properties are just, rubbish is just being thrown outside, not outside, into the property. area of a yard or a front garden, and there isn't any comeback. And this is where we have to be a little bit more forceful as a council and not have to tick every box and go in there and be a little bit proactive and say, well, actually, this street or your property is bringing down the whole of the street. And if we have to charge them for any repairs, any removals, it should fall against the property of the house when those people sell that house. It could be in 5, 10, 15 years' time. But there's a penalty where this authority will not lose, will put some governance on the property. So my plea is that we look probably over on a yearly cycle, not so much at individual properties, but individual areas. And we can use that as a project. So, for example, if councillors from Blythe want to pick a certain area, and Ashington pick a certain area, and dare I say Ponteland wants to pick an area, let's concentrate on that as well as looking at the empty properties. And then from that information, bring a project together that can be delivered to the council that will be achievable. We don't want you to fix Northumberland. We want you to fix it a little bit at a time, but I don't want to fix one house at a time. I want a policy there that's going to sort it all out. So sorry for the rant, but well done to you and your...
Of course you can respond.
Thank you. So a few points that you made there, Councillor Gallagher. The two properties that we're focusing on is for the really challenging one, the Empty Homes Working Group. The Corporate Empty Homes Forums are naturally looking at a wider range of properties, and the team itself are always looking at empty properties and how they can bring them in. You're absolutely right, some of those will be the easier ones where we're working with landlords to encourage them. But the difficulty is when we get non-engagement. The accreditation scheme is about trying to drive up property standards to support people's health and well-being. We've got a tenant accreditation scheme as well to help tenants try and manage their properties, but they're all voluntary. This is the difficulty with those schemes. You can't actually enforce on landlords using that. What I would say, the enforcement powers generally sit with environmental protection and environmental health. And I know that John Robertson and his team are very proactive in trying to do that, and they have issued notices for people, and they do recharge against properties. That's part of the anchor for us when we're looking at some of the challenging empty properties, what charges have been placed. But some of them aren't rechargeable. Statutorily, they're not allowed to recharge for them. So that's the challenge for that. But public protection, that sits with public protection, so it would... I'm not an expert in that area, so it would probably be good for you to get an update from them about what they can and can't do. But I think when you're talking about areas, again, we are working very closely with the regeneration team, which is about looking at the areas. It is a huge challenge, and we can't, and you know that, and we can't minimise that challenge. And I think it's something we've been talking about for some time, and it's like a tanker trying to turn. And trying to get residents to take an element of responsibility as well. It needs a whole approach, certainly not just one team trying to pick it off. I would totally agree with that. We need to be very coordinated in what we're doing and try and promote the benefits of it to the landlords and the tenants and residents to try and get an outcome and try and stop them doing the fly tipping and take a pride in their area. But how we do that, I'm not quite sure yet.
Just very quickly to come back on that, there has to be grounds in our armament to turn around and say, look, your property is not safe, it's not healthy for the environment, sometimes you could use street scene. You've got the planning, you've got the health, you've got the enforcement, and I just don't see it connecting together to work. And we need our areas better than what they were before, and it's all right saying we've got the weans, and I'm not being disrespectful. The quick weans are great weans, and the numbers are great numbers. But if you've got 100 that you fixed, but there's 20 that look really terrible, they're the ones we should be concentrating on. So it's the really bad ones rather than the quick wins. So same again, you know, well done to your team. I know you're undermanned. £50,000 doesn't go far when you're talking about barristers. So the reality is you're up against it, and you know I wish you all the best. But the whole idea of scrutiny is that we raise our concerns, and you're hearing it now from Blythe, from Ashington, and you know, dare I say, from Port Dealand. So, you know...
It's not something we disagree with, Councillor
Yeah.
Gallagher. I would say that you would have the full support of the team on it as well, because we see the problems, because we get the queries from the landlords and the local residents. So I think we're on the same page. It's just how we do it.
Well, 100% support for you and your team in the world. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Mark, did you want to come in?
Thanks, Chair. No, my question's been answered. Thanks.
Okay, excellent. Thanks for that. I'm not sure where we'll go with all of this. All I know is that it's blooming complicated. You know, if it was easy, we would have done it. We've got a great set of people working on it, you know, and we do get results, but you can't just, unfortunately, we live in a free country. We can't just say, we don't like the look of your house. You know, you're going to have to do something about it. And proving it's unsafe is if you think about some of the places that didn't get any damage during the storm, appear to me to look like some of the worst maintained houses I've ever seen, and yet they're still standing, and the house next door hasn't got a roof on it. So go figure. Anyway, Councillor Morfitt, and then I must bring the planning chief in for the last few minutes.
It's just a quick question about purchase and repair. You explained that EDMOs are slow and lengthy, and that the Homes England funding for purchase and repair has dried up. Is purchase and repair a quick and easy process? And if it is, could it not be considered a form of investment that could generate money? And could it not potentially be a good solution?
Yes, is the answer. It can be quick and easy. We're currently working on things like, you know, former right to buy properties. If they're up for sale, is there an opportunity for us to buy them and bring them back into our stock? So our housing delivery team's looking at that. Some of them, it depends on the condition, because it's got to be, it depends on the cost of the property versus how much it's going to get it to a lettable position. But yes, it is an option, definitely. Yeah.
Thanks for that. The next thing is Northumberland Infrastructure Funding Statement. And you haven't got much time, really. I apologise. But as we realise that the document you've produced is a far grander affair than it need be, which I think we all agree that it should be the way you presented it, but it doesn't necessarily need to be like that, does it?
Thanks for that, Chair. Do you want me to give a quick overview of what the document is and what it does and where it's going?
Yep.
Thank you. Okay. This is the second of the annual new style reporting documents on developer contributions. And by developer contributions, we mean Section 106's unilateral undertakings, or whatever the term you want to call them. It's about trying to be clear about what we get in. In the past, we were perhaps a bit inconsistent in how we agreed Section 106s. So rather than us just having an Excel spreadsheet saying, here's the amount of money we've collected, we tried to make the document readable by a member of the general public who could see what we were doing and what we were doing with the money. The overview, really, for last year was that we collected 1.5 million out of the 5.6 million that we secured, and we spent out of that arising about 2.8 million. Some of the outcomes on the ground for that were 328 affordable houses we secured, expansions to schools which totalled 175 school places, and just over £1 million worth of off-site highway works. The current Section 106 pot at the moment contains almost £8 million. The collection last year was about 700,000 lower than the previous year. That's probably because of the lag in the system, because of a very quiet period the year before in terms of new sites, because of the pandemic. We have submitted this document to central government, as we are required to do. It used to be to the Department of Housing, Communities and Local Government. It now goes to the Department of Levelling Up and housing communities. And the feedback we got was that it was an excellent document, very clear and informative, and they suggested it was a good model for how other authorities could do it. The document isn't just about giving information, it's about raising awareness of the process. So there's plenty of photographs and examples in there, and we've had good feedback on it so far, but I'm very keen to hear from members of scrutiny to how else we could improve and clarify this. I've had some suggestions, for example, that maybe we could consider breaking the report down onto a LAC basis rather than a county basis, and then we could have separate documents for that. I would also emphasise that we are heading towards a new local plan and also elements of planning reform, which will come out of the planning white paper. And because of that, we will need to have a new approach next year, and there will need to be some guidance for parish and town councils and for members and for communities on how we ask for and secure contributions from developers. Okay, so the headline is we secured 5.6 million last year. That's slightly down the year before, but we can probably understand why. Thank you.
Right. Before I bring, go on. I'll let Councillor Castle start, and I'll just say something at the end. Go on.
Are you right? Thank you, Chair. Yes, just 106 is. Oh, this is a long-running saga. I've been on planning 20 years, and it's beginning to look coherent. Can I put it that way? It never did before. It's beginning to look coherent, and I do like the localisation aspect of it, because Section 106 contributions normally offer local schemes that do actually, shall we say, deal with the adverse consequences of the development in the local area. So one would hope that that money was spent locally. And how do we actually secure that and know that it's going to be? And I've discovered myself on a particular scheme in my part of the world where money was going to go towards sport and leisure. And goodness me, if we'd known that earlier or thought about that through better, we'd have had the scheme put together better, because others might get in before we do. And it does seem to be that we could tighten it up and involve the local area councils much more than we already do. But I'm glad that it's getting clearer and more coherent. And there are figures in front of me that actually mean something, because I couldn't have actually found those a year ago. Thank you.
Councillor Dodd and Councillor Gallagher.
I'd like to think that things are tightening up and becoming more uniform. We had a large development at Ponteland that went through a long time ago and sat. And there was a 106 stroke whatever contribution of about £700,000 to improve the roads and various things. And in that was a £300,000 subsidy to run a bus constantly from this development of about 200 houses up and down to Ponteland from the police headquarters, totally out of sync with today's thinking. And we were sort of handcuffed, probably still are, although it's a bit of manoeuvrability, because what would have happened, that empty bus would run up and down until the subsidy run out, or it ran out of diesel, or the fumes got so bad. And I just think we need to be flexible, because what happened 10 years ago is now different. So I feel that I don't know how we can put flexibility into all planning applications that have sat. But it's been a long battle. Thank you.
Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome clarity around the 106. I have for a long time held a lot of suspicion around how and when how that's worked out to benefit the local community. It's referred to as the money being redirected into a pot. And I take assurance that, you know, from the comments that are being said, and hopefully in the new plan, that the money will still be governed into the local areas where the local builds are, or the local disruptions. Can't understand on a few occasions, where most of the occasions that 106 money is automatically diverted to education and sports, when we've got so many other issues with government cuts coming that could help the benefit and enhance the area where we live. I think that planning as well should be very much on the ball, that if we are building new developments, houses, that the schools have to be supported, not for education and not for sports, but for the buildings that have to educate our kids. Maybe the officer can keep me right around the 5-year balance. Basically, if that money is committed into something, it's got 5 years to be used up. And I think that really that should be reduced. It should be a 3-year maximum, so that the money that is being given back in the community should be benefited straight away. Because I can name a couple of schemes that money is still lying in the bank that was never used. And I can name one scheme that we nearly lost the money on because we never reacted quick enough as an authority. You asked about possibly clear ways of handing out the 106 and for people to understand the system. I think it's an easy tick box exercise. 1, a developer comes. 2, the developer puts or commits, or we negotiate a 106 payment. That should be done on a timely basis, and we should have a tick box exercise at the end of the outcome. Because at the minute, that never happens. You know, you can get that information if you resource it and go through it. But if it's just a table exercise, people, and it could be brought to the LAC every month to watch the process as it goes through. And once that's completed, that can be wiped off any table. So there's easy ways and there's hard ways, but still a lot of concerns around 106 from myself. So thank you for that, Chair. Chair, could I just also mention, on section 3, there's a lot of figures there that's been, 106 have benefited from it. One of them is, it just comes under education, 2020 to 2021, £271,000. Don't know what it means. I have got an idea because I've researched it, but I'm sure the other members don't. And on the following page on that, there's a payment of £49,861 goes to the Ashton Town team. That's defunct, basically. That should have read the Ashton Town Council. So thank you very much for that.
It's okay. Rob, are you going to come back and then we'll better wrap this up?
Yeah, thanks, that Chair. Yeah. This is a complex process, and what we do now is do a lot of really detailed triangulation from what we negotiated, what the trigger points are for it to be given to us, and then the trigger points for it being spent. Because in the past, Councillor Gallagher is right, there was a risk of losing money because it would have timed out. One quick point, I much prefer consistent, say, 10-year periods for spending, because sometimes if you're talking, say, about a new school or an extension to a school, sometimes you have to amalgamate several 106 contributions from several schemes into one pot to pay for that piece of work. And sometimes you cannot deliver the infrastructure, be that healthcare facilities or a new school, within 3 years. So a reasonable time period works better for that. It's also the case that what we do now is that we consult education, healthcare, the local sporting facilities, and normally the shopping list, if you call it, adds up to more than the scheme will stand in terms of a Section 106 contribution. So what we've developed as part of the new local plan is a strategic prioritisation of where certain elements of support are needed across the county. And that's very much tailored towards mapping out what growth levels are anticipated against what we know the capacity and capacity shortfalls are in those areas already. So, for example, if a school is close to capacity, we know that now, and we know if more housing is programmed for that area, that the contributions may need to focus on school places as opposed to healthcare contributions. But in other areas, if a GP surgery is already over its list number, which is good practice for an area, then we will focus the contributions onto healthcare. Finally, I'd say that this is an ongoing process of refining it, and it's both a case of better reporting and more consistent and transparent processes of actually agreeing the Section 106 agreements in the first place. I'm hopeful that the new plan will set out a much more clearer approach to this, so developers will know in advance what they've got to pay when they come here if they want to develop, say, X houses. But I'm also very interested to hear from members better ways we could lay this information out and provide information to members, because, as I said in my introduction, this is only the second of a new style way of doing annual reporting, and I'm keen to keep refining this to better respond to members and community requirements for information. Thanks.
Excellent. I kind of think we could talk about this all day, but I'm kind of going to get shot in a minute. So I'm just going to ask, I'm sure Councillor Gallagher would like to speak to the officer afterwards. The answer will be given. What I would say is that do we think it would be a good idea if this was sent, sort of the individual bits to the LACs? Is that something we could recommend happen? Okay, so that would be good, Rob. And it's certainly taken the mystery out of me, because it was a complete... Nobody would talk about 106 money at one time. The planning department were just like, no, can't talk about that, it's confidential and all that kind of stuff. So I'm really pleased to see that we're actually being open and honest with each other. Let's do the LAC thing, and before I bring the meeting to an end, Councillor Horncastle wishes to speak, and so long as he speaks quickly, that'll be fine.
Right. Yeah, I mean, Rob says this isn't just about information, well, it isn't, but information and clarity on 106 for members is seriously important, because how many times have we seen developments go through and the 106's agreements have been mentioned in committee, and then we seem to lose track of them, and we don't know if it's being spent, if it's all being spent, if it's time limited, if any of it goes back to the developer, which can happen. So this is important, and even more important if once the new local plan is implemented, and if we implement the community infrastructure levy, it's good for members to know what is happening with any of these 106s from the developers, so we can keep up with it in our areas and put a little bit of pressure on various departments. It's not always planners, sometimes it's highways and other departments. So, yeah, good.
Excellent, thank you very much for that. I think we're all agreed. The last two things on the agenda is the scrutiny work programme. If you've got any problems or would need any information about that, just email Mr Nicholson and he'd be more than happy to help. The only urgent business I've been told of is that I've got to finish at 3:30. Failed again. So it's been a pleasure to see you all. I look forward to seeing you all shortly.
Can I just ask you a question? Why did we have to finish at 3:30? Why were we working towards a 4 o'clock deadline? There's a lot of things that need to be discussed. This is scrutiny, and it should be open to having a good bit of scrutiny. I just felt on the latter part of those scrutiny meetings, conversations, that things were being eked out because we're looking at a clock instead of the document.
I quite agree. That's my fault. I should have speeded everything up in the first place. But there is another meeting coming here in here at 4 o'clock. And if I hadn't changed the time from 10:30 to 2 o'clock, we wouldn't have the problem. But there you go.